Welcome back. It is time now for today's France 24 debate. Now, America's longest war is over. With just 1 minute to spare before President Joe Biden's midnight deadline for exiting the country, US Air Force planes carried the last contingent of troops from Kabul Airport last night. Well, it was a frantic, harrowing and extremely dangerous final 2 weeks for those soldiers as they oversaw the airlift of tens of thousands of Afghans, Americans and others seeking to escape Afghanistan, a country that is once again ruled by the Taliban. Well, the 20-year war, which claimed more than 2,400 American lives, the lives of 1,100 troops from coalition countries, and 250,000 Afghan lives, running into a cost of some $2 trillion, that war is now over. Well, today the Taliban triumphantly marched into Kabul Airport, proudly posing for photographs against the backdrop of the largely disabled US military hardware that was left behind. Well, the nation of 38 million people will now find out what path their country will take under the new brand of Taliban leadership. So what will this chapter be remembered for? Will history be kind to President Joe Biden for ending the so-called forever war? And what kind of a future awaits the Afghan people? Those are some of the questions I'll be putting to our panel of experts today. Here with me in the studio is author and former diplomat Olivier Weber. Welcome to you. You're an author on a book on the region. Tell us briefly about that book.
Yeah, it's a book actually about the commanders of Massoud's son, which is Ahmad Massoud, 32 years old, educated in London, King's College, but also about the spirit of resistance all over the world, from women mainly, against fanaticism and obscurantism coming from the radical Muslim groups.
Okay, so
it's a short essay, it's not so long.
All right, well, I look forward to reading that. We'll be speaking about that in just a moment. We'll cross to you in a moment as well. We're also joined from Atlanta by Ouida Mehran, who is a lecturer at the University of Exeter. Very warm welcome back to France 24. Always good to have you with us. And from New York, we're joined by Annie Fortheimer, who's a non-resident associate with the Center for Strategic and International Studies and a former deputy chief of mission at the US Embassy in Kabul. And you also served, I gather, as the Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Afghanistan. So thank you so much for being with us here on France 24. And last but not least, we're joined from Kabul by our senior reporter, Cyril Payen. Cyril, let us begin with you. 31st of August, a day that some in Afghanistan would call Independence Day. Others might call it day one of a fresh nightmare. What's the mood like?
Well, it's a mixed mood, actually. You were absolutely right. You have, on one side, the Talibans, which have been sent in the capital city of Afghanistan, Kabul, in the past days from all corners of Afghanistan. So we're talking about people who have been fighting guerrilla warfare for years. And just they have been sent here by hundreds, maybe even if it's not thousands, just to secure the city, discovering the city. For instance, we have been meeting a lot of young warriors, young Talibans, which are very non-educated, by the way, but from whom it was the first time they put a foot in the capital city. So for them tonight, this is a time for joy, time for, they can call it peace, whatever it's the name, whatever is the word. There is a sense of joy, and for them this is the end of a chapter, which is the long chapter of war. So we can hear night has fallen here on Kabul for this first very weird and strange and very expected day of the new era of under the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, ruled by the Talibans, the new Talibans, if we may call them so. So we can hear shooting, gunshots all around, but tonight there is no much tension apparently in the streets of Kabul. People are, on the Taliban side, people are just celebrating the end of the war, and moreover, the big defeat of the Americans. On the side of the Kabulis, the people in the very streets of Kabul, well, it's really, as you were mentioning, another story, another mood. People are, honestly, frankly, don't expect too much from the new Taliban, even if they do much efforts to say that they have changed. There will be a lot of inclusivity in the new society they are about to form. The government, which they will form also very quite shortly, because we really feel that they want to move very fast. This government will be inclusive, with whom we don't know. See, this is quite theoretical for the Afghans, and especially for the generation we have been living from 1996 to 2001 on the reign of the Talibans at this time, and they don't expect much than jumping again into quite bad unknown. They are, let's say, skeptical. But the thing also is that they are quite mute now. People were talking in the past days. We have been here for 10, 11 days. People were just talking. They were just we have, but they were talking. But now it looks like it's quite dark for me. But they are just expecting for more tensions there in the capital city.
Okay, Cyril, thanks for that. I can see it's looking a little bit dark there in Kabul at the moment. Stay with us if you can, though. We'll try to come back to you. We're just speaking there to France 24's Cyril Payan, our senior reporter, who's one of the very few foreign journalists still on the ground in Afghanistan. A little earlier today, he was able to film inside the airport, which is now fully under Taliban control. Here's his report.
This is Kabul's airport on the 31st of August 2021. A few hours ago, the city became the official capital of the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan. It was the last sanctuary for United States forces. Now they've departed. The Taliban has won the war and taken control of the airport.
The
runway seems almost abandoned. Just 24 hours ago, it was the scene of one of the largest airlifts in history.
دموکراسی امریکا بود که همینجا بوده. عمرای ما کلانای ما گفتن که ما تعهد بسته کردیم، اونا خو به تعهد خود وفا نکرده، خو ما وفا میکنیم دیگه. الا کنیم برم.
The American troops who just pulled out of the country a few hours ago have just left dozens of vehicles as shoppers. This American shopper is just left over. We can see lots of them around where I'm standing. And the Talibans are coming in and just checking, really basically checking what's going on and what do they have. It's really an amazing situation, quite surreal here where we are living.
Afghanistan's new leaders have it all still to do, and the threat posed by their rivals, the Islamic State group, weighs heavily on the country.
ما فکر میکنم همین پروژه داعش به خروج امریکا آرزو دارم که تمام شود. نه انشالله که از این بعد ما و شما شاهد این جوری یک صحنه های یک روزای نباشیم که بیشتر می بودیم.
The surroundings bear the scars of combat, and the American troops sabotaged equipment they couldn't bring with them. But the Taliban are confident. Among them, the man who's just announced that he's the new head of the airport.
از امارات افغانستان اسلامی امارات نفر منصوبین مسلکی داره. هیچ ما کمبود ندارم شکر الحمدلله. فل از دوره فارغ شده کلش فعال است میخواد فاز میدان فعال کنه.
The Taliban may be in charge, but they're in charge of a country on the brink of collapse. After so many years of war and sacrifice, the challenges that await Afghanistan are stacking up.
Okay, a report there by France 24 senior reporter Cyril Payan, who we were just speaking to a few moments ago before being plunged into darkness there in the Afghan capital. Let's kick off our discussion now. Here in the studio with me, as I said, is author and former diplomat Olivier Weber. Let me start with you since you're here with us. Simple question for you. Has President Joe Biden done the right thing?
I think he has no choice because he was continuing the Trump's policy. But the problem is that the strategy was to evacuate military before the civilian, and it's a mistake because you have seen the disasters at Baker in Kabul, and it's a disaster in terms of symbol, in terms of politics, in terms of military too, and it's a gain also for Taliban because the Taliban are very happy to see we are gaining, we are winning, we are defeating the American troops. This is not true. It was just an agreement of not peace but of withdrawal. It was been signed in Doha in Qatar last year, but Taliban wanted to show that they're in charge and they are able to push back actually the military troops. So it's I think it's a mistake in the short time actually because maybe Biden didn't have the choice, but he must have taken some time, some months, to evacuate people, civilian first, and after military in second position.
Thanks for that. Annie, for timer, do you agree President Biden had no choice in the matter, therefore he simply couldn't have done other than what he did?
I actually do not agree. I think that other options existed, and that the decision, not only was it badly handled on a technical level, especially as the other commentator noted, taking the military out before the civilians were really accounted for. I don't think that this withdrawal had to be done on a set timeline. I think it should have been conditions-based, and that would have allowed for greater leverage and probably a better outcome.
Thanks for that. Wida Mehrani, your thoughts. Was this the right thing? Was this the right course of action by the US president?
It wasn't. It was the troops would have, the withdrawal troops, the agreement was withdrawal troops, withdrawal of US troops from Afghanistan. And the manner it was done, it was basically conceding to whatever demands of the Taliban were. And it should have been condition-based. And we wouldn't have, if it was condition-based, we wouldn't have faced the situation, the fiasco, and the disastrous situation that we are facing right now in Afghanistan. That wouldn't have happened. So in Afghanistan, inside, it was expected that the troops would withdraw eventually from Afghanistan, but not in this manner. So it was a decision that it wasn't essentially, especially not for Afghanistan.
Okay, but seen through the prism of someone in the Biden administration, this was, after all, the greatest airlift of human beings in history. And Annie, sorry, let me go back to you and just ask you, I mean, how do you think the US military feel about the way all of this has been handled, seeing perhaps some might say 20 plus years of hard work and sacrifice being done away with in the blink of an eye?
I think that the military and diplomats like myself feel extremely sad and angry. And as you say, the feeling that sacrifice has not been necessarily honored. I also think that the tremendous airlift that took place, was a great effort, but that's because we caused the need for it in the first place. So I give everyone credit for all their hard work, but honestly, it would have been better not to have created the actual need for this kind of last-minute, hasty, and at times fatal airlift for Afghans. So I don't think the military right now believes that this was, in all, the best way that it could have been used.
And Olivier, what do you think America's international partners make of how all of this has been handled?
Yeah, I think there was a mistake, actually, not done in 2001. It was actually a good action to try to make reprisals, after the World Trade Center attacks against bin Laden and Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. But the big mistake was in 2003 in Iraq, because this war was destabilizing all the Middle East and reinforcing Iran. Now we are seeing that there's a kind of new game, as said Kipling before, during the war with the British Empire in Central Asia and Afghanistan. And the new game is with the new old empires, who are the Chinese, the Russian, and the Iranians. And Iran, for example, is a big winner, And I think it was difficult for the Western countries, actually, for all of them, including USA, but also the partners of NATO countries, to try to apply, to bring some democratic model to be placated, to be down on the Afghan system, which is a clinic and ethnic, tribal, all tribal society. And it was a little bit pretentious, maybe arrogant. It was actually, from my point of view, knowing very well the Afghan people, a mistake, And it was a bit better for just to react for 2 or 3 years with a military intervention, and then actually try to take condition from the Afghan government. And also the Afghan regime have to be blamed, with corruption, all the money have been lost and wasted, with the ministers and so on, and not to say about the people in exile. So I think there's a lack of long-term strategy for all the Western partners of USA.
Sure, and as you say, all of this, something of a coup, not just for the Taliban, but for plenty of America's strategic rivals around the world as well. And I just want to ask you, Wida, what do you think all of this does for and means for America's credibility internationally speaking?
It has certainly undermined America's credibility at the international scene. We have seen previously that other NATO allies have been quite critical of President Biden's decision to withdraw in this manner over a short period of time without putting those conditions in place and the way that the withdrawal took place, the troops withdrawal. So it has raised a lot of criticism amongst other NATO allies, including the UK. And that being said, the whole manner that this whole withdrawal took place has really undermined the US's credibility and also at the international scene. Right now, who is benefiting from the whole situation in Afghanistan right now? And there are American and other NATO rivals in the region who are benefiting from this situation. Iran, for one, Raisi has welcomed the withdrawal of troops from Afghanistan, and the Taliban itself has seen it as a victory, and they've built on the narrative that they've defeated the most powerful countries in the world. And that in itself is telling, how much telling it is that a group such as the Taliban is sending this message out to other terrorist organizations as well. The narrative of defeat the greatest powers and the narrative of victory, and the message being sent is also that for other terrorist organizations that victory is a possibility for them as well. And here is an example in Afghanistan. Hang in there, carry on, you will eventually be successful. So that is this is a win for a lot of terrorist organizations. Looking back in the region, Pakistan is benefiting to have an unstable Afghanistan in the backyard, to have certain level of control over the government. And China and Russia are the other regional rival players that would have liked to see the US troops and Western troops getting out of their back door, essentially.
Yeah, actually, I agree. And there was a challenge for Taliban just to occupy Kabul very quickly. Nobody expected, even the Taliban, even the minister of Taliban didn't expect it to seize, to occupy Kabul so quickly, August 15, 2 weeks ago. And why? Because they wanted to be able to say, we are defeating US troops. And even the Pakistanis mentors, the Pakistanis advisor were not expecting this kind of victory. But now there's a vacuum in Central Asia, occupied by Pakistan, is true, Iran, Russia, and China, for different reasons. But I'm sure that there will be a change also of strategy for the US, future US, and even Western countries' military operation in the land, in the foreign countries. I mean, massive land operation. It will be finished. Why? Because the strategy now is to bring a kind of zero-debt policy to make war, for example, with drones, predators, airstrike, joystick, from Key West and from France and elsewhere. So there will be a change of strategy and not willingness to impose, let's say, a different model of democracy, which is my values also, but maybe not sizable, not applicable for other countries. So it will be a change in that for the long-term strategy.
Sure, and let's just go back to the very beginning, what brought this war about. Of course, it was within a couple of weeks of the 11th of September attacks on back in 2001. And of course, the goal at the time, the stated goal, was to seek out Osama bin Laden. That was done 10 years ago. And therefore, I'm wondering, Annie, for time, I mean, isn't there a sense perhaps this war in Afghanistan could have been half as long as it was had it ended with the accomplishment of that stated goal, namely the targeted killing of Osama bin Laden?
Well, I think that the killing of bin Laden was a huge symbolic moment, but I think it would be a mistake to consider that to be some kind of death blow to al-Qaeda and the threat that it represents. So on the one hand, sure, you could say that after 2011, there wasn't a reason to stay. But I think a broader vision is, first of all, that al-Qaeda is still a viable force, and there's still one today. And secondly, as the other commentators have noted, there are a lot of good, geostrategic reasons to want to make sure that Afghanistan doesn't fall into some other country's orbit. And so the idea on the part of the United States wasn't as much about Western values as it was about stability. And looking for stability, I guess we believe that on some level it would be better to have the Afghans choose their own leaders and a democratic process is one way that they were going to do that. It is, of course, a tribally divided society. That's true. But I also think that can be overstated. Afghans have absolutely moved to cities. They have moved away from a lot of the traditional ways that they used to live. The Taliban is going to find that out. And so it's not probably good enough to say that we could have just gathered the tribal leadership that existed in the 1980s and handed them back the country. Something new had to be born in order for Afghanistan to be stable. And Afghan stability was what the U.S. strategic and moral interest was and still is.
Yes, but unfortunately, I think it's fair to say, isn't it, that Afghanistan is a significantly more dangerous place than it was even in 2001. And we've got the emergence of even more deadly organizations such as ISIS-K now roaming the country as well. So, I mean, it's been more than a failure, hasn't it?
Well, I don't think that Afghanistan created ISIS-K, but you're absolutely right. Once it was created, it found a safe haven in Afghanistan. And I think that the process that the U.S. had to try to bring stability, yes, it has failed, but the Taliban is the group that created this power vacuum into which ISIS-K and TTP and other groups have flourished.
Weeda, let me get your opinion. Is Afghanistan does it pose significantly greater threat to the rest of the world than it did before the US invasion?
It could. It potentially could, because when the Taliban took over Afghanistan, and particularly when they took over Kabul and Bagram Airport, they released thousands of former Al-Qaeda, ISIS, and TTP, Tehrik Taliban of Pakistan, fighters from prisons, and they welcomed them. And now they are that can create a security situation in Kabul, and it can actually get out of control, out of hand, and Taliban does not have control of the country as much as we want them to, because right now, even if they promise that they would bring stability and security to the country, the latest attacks in Kabul have shown that the group is not able to manage all of these other terrorist organizations inside Afghanistan and keep them at bay. And it would be only a matter of time before there would be a spillover effect here. And a lot of these terrorist organizations, they're not bound by political borders. They are not. TTP, Tehrik Taliban of Pakistan, is operating both in Afghanistan, outside Afghanistan, in Pakistan. There are Islamic movement of Uzbekistan. There is also the East Turkestan Islamic movement, just to name a few of them, including Al-Qaeda and Daesh or Islamic State Khorasan as well. So they do have a freer hand with the absence of international troops in Afghanistan, the absence of the former Afghan National Security Forces in the country. They have a freer hand to operate inside Afghanistan. And unfortunately, the situation can get out of control of the Taliban, particularly if Afghanistan gets into a civil war, and if the Taliban does not manage to form an inclusive government, and the Panjshir groups start fighting and do military operations against the Taliban, then we will plunge into a civil war in Afghanistan, and that would in itself create the opportunity for other terrorist organizations to take place.
Sure. And Olivier, I want to ask your opinion. Is that a very real risk, therefore, do you think? Do you see Afghanistan descending into a state of civil war?
Yeah, maybe not a civil war, but actually to be again a sanctuary for international terrorism, The Taliban, what do they want? They want to stay longer than before Act 1. It was 5 years from September 96 to end of 2001. The big mistake was to have supported bin Laden and Al-Qaeda. Today, they will be more tricky. They are more clever. They are better organized also. They are richer than before, because for 20 years, they used to make guerrilla warfare. I say your correspondent is true, but also they used to expose some knowledge. They used to have new sources of financing, etc.
They're better organized.
Better organized. And first of them also the drugs trafficking, like poppy field and then poppy and then opium and then drugs trafficking, heroin trafficking. That's the main source of maybe 50-60% of the finance for Taliban. But at the same time, I think they want to be judged on the facts. They want to be judged on the long term and to be in a good position with a good relation with the neighbors like Iran, Pakistan, Russia, and China. But I'm not sure, or I'm sure they are not able to control some groups like first Al-Qaeda, because there's a lot of organic ties, between Taliban and first of them Afghani network, and then Al-Qaeda, and secondly with ISIS-K, because there's a kind of war of emulation, competition between them. So I'm afraid that even if the Taliban don't want to export the model, the other groups want, and it will be very dangerous for all over the world. And for the moment, to finish, for example, the Islamic groups in Sahel, in Central Africa and Sahara, they are looking what is to be done now with the killings, with the attempts, with the search of the ISIS-K in Afghanistan. This is a kind of example for them.
Sure. Well, let's listen to what the Taliban have got to say. I mean, they claim they're different. They say we're not like before, and people don't have anything in particular to worry about. There won't be reprisals. They issued this by way of reassurance. Let's listen to a spokesperson for the Taliban now.
We give full assurances to everybody. No one should have any concerns. The Islamic Emirate is here to provide security, to secure people's dignity. We work for that day and night. God willing, a government will soon be announced. All government offices will reopen. The banks and the economy will start moving. The country will take steps towards prosperity, far from war and insecurity. And people will return to their normal lives. The Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan wants good relations with the Americans through diplomacy. However, the Americans failed here. They failed. From the military perspective, they failed to achieve their goals. But the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan wants to have good relations with the whole world on behalf of the nation. We want to have strong diplomatic relations with all, including the United States.
Okay, a spokesperson with the Taliban there saying they would like to have strong diplomatic ties with the United States. Annie, for time, you've served as a diplomat in Afghanistan. Do you see that as likely? Do you visualize a day when the United States is speaking on diplomatic terms with the Taliban?
Well, first of all, 100% of that will rely on their actions and not their words. They have figured out what people want to hear, and that's what they're saying. But what they're doing is another matter. If any of what that gentleman said was true, then they would be allowing people to exit Afghanistan through the land borders, which they have sealed. So I don't take their statement of trying to be international, responsible international players seriously, unless they can guarantee freedom of movement for people who are currently trapped inside the country, first of all. And second of all, diplomatic recognition is one of the few remaining forms of leverage right now. So the international community with the G7 and the UN Security Council are trying to set forward some terms under which they would consider it: freedom of movement, freedom of humanitarian goods and actors, and of course, the observance of basic human rights, such as non-retribution. There are way too many reports, and the media isn't free anymore, of people being listed on special lists and some being taken from their homes.
Sure, but one area in which the Taliban did come good on their pledge, which was that they wouldn't attack US troops during that closing chapter, and appears they honoured that pledge. But let me just ask you this. I mean, putting the clock back 2-3 years ago, when President Donald Trump at the time reached out to the Taliban and suggested striking some sort of a deal with them, how do you feel like all of that was managed? And do you think Donald Trump was perhaps naive to begin that dialogue in the first place?
Well, I will leave my feelings about whether he was naive or not out of it, because there were people working for him who did know what they were doing. And when that was initiated, it was probably necessary and it was probably time. But there was a formula at first that was later disregarded. The formula at first was nothing's agreed until everything's agreed. In other words, the US withdrawal and the Taliban promises would go hand in hand with substantive Afghan negotiations and a ceasefire. And that the conditionality was we wouldn't withdraw unless the other parts of the agreement were underway. That was not the case. So whatever the Trump administration set in motion, there were ways that it could have led to a conditioned withdrawal, not a condition-free withdrawal, and it would have been a better outcome. And just to mention, the Taliban not attacking the US as a sign of their willingness to comply with international promises doesn't ring true to me. They didn't attack us because they didn't need to, period.
Olivier, your
Yeah,
thoughts?
actually, the Taliban regime, or the new regime, wants to show to the world that they are able to restore law and order. So there was a killing in Kabul Airport. It's a very bad situation for Taliban. It's a good point for ISIS-K, as you mentioned. But I think also the force was with the Taliban, because during the Doha negotiation, there were only two channels, the US administration, Trump administration, and then the Taliban movement and political office in Doha. But the Afghan government of Ashraf Ghani were out actually of the peace process, and it was not a peace process, it was not a peace agreement, it was a withdrawal agreement. So as far as the US troops were there stationed up to tonight, yesterday night in Afghanistan, Kabul, it was okay. Then now Taliban are in full charge, they can do what they want. But actually they will give some guarantees, I think, on the women, on the school. It will be propaganda for me. It will be mainly in Kabul and in some other areas. But they want not to push back the red lines, to show that there are some efforts that have changed. They want to have the international guarantees. They help also because 1/3 of the 40 million people in Afghanistan are in desperate need, accurate needs in terms of food. And they are waiting also for WFP program, the World Food Program, the help of the IMF and World Bank, etc., etc. So I think there will be a kind of channel, not to negotiate, not to recognize the Taliban, but to say we are waiting for you. We want to have good points now and not tomorrow.
Sure. Well, we're running short on time. We've actually got 10 minutes or so left, and I'd like to start looking forwards as opposed to looking backwards from this point onwards. Let me turn to you, Wida Mehran. I just want to ask you, do you think obviously the Taliban have a hugely complex task on their hand, running this nation of 38 million people. I mean, the track record for running Afghanistan, goes to show that it's not an easy country to run. Do you think they've got what it takes, and do you think they've got the right people groomed up to fill some of the key positions to make the country something resembling a functioning country?
That is a difficult question, and I don't think the Taliban can actually function well enough to manage the country, because the Taliban itself, it is not a homogeneous group. It has internal frictions and issues. Right now, the group we hear already that there is friction between the Taliban in terms of the Taliban who are from the northern parts of the country, the Taliban, the predominantly central Taliban leadership that does not actually trust some of their own commanders in the rest of the country rather than Kabul, the south. So there is an internal friction. The other problem with the Taliban is that they do have this network of Haqqani network inside the Taliban, part and parcel of the Taliban, which has very dark human rights background, which is a terrorist organization that is on terrorist list for the US and the UN. Already they have characters such as Khalil Haqqani, there is a bounty of $5 million over his head for his whereabouts, because he has been responsible for one of the bloodiest attacks in Afghanistan against civilians and the former government employees and ANDSF and so forth. The Taliban has to overcome those issues, internal fragmentations, and the liability that Haqqani network has been for them as well, and which is currently in control of Kabul. Then the Taliban has to have it has to deal with the issue of right now resistance against them amongst Panjshir Front. that they are saying that there would be a fight if the Taliban does not make accommodations and does not form a government which is inclusive. So that's another challenge on the way of Taliban. And in addition to those issues, the Taliban, the economy of the country is plummeting. It is on the verge of collapse, and it is collapsing. The prices have gone skyrocketing in Afghanistan. The value of Afghani currency has plummeted right now, and thousands and thousands have lost their jobs. And all of these can give hand to hand and create a for the Taliban, which I don't think that the group will be able to manage. Currently, the Taliban, apparently from the reports that we are getting from Afghanistan, is not even able to pay for its own fighters, the salary of its own fighters. They're not able to pay the salaries of civil services and administration. How can they actually run a country like that? And they don't have the manpower either. They put a mullah, a religious scholar, as the head of the central bank, and that is a profession that you need people with the skills and knowledge to run an institution like that, which the Taliban doesn't. And we hear reports that they brought in the manpower and a skilled force from Pakistan. Pakistani nationals, from what we hear right now, have been inside the Central Bank of Afghanistan trying to deal with the technicality of the issues and take over jobs that were for Afghans. Sure. And this has created a very complex situation right now that Afghans they do not have jobs. There is a brain drain that the Taliban has to deal with, and that's why they're closing the borders as well. They're not allowing people to leave the country.
Sure, and you raise a lot of important points there, and of course the UN warning of drought in parts of the country that could lead to a possible famine. The list goes on, a huge number of challenges. I'd like to pick up on one of the ones that you mentioned there, Ouida, because you, of course, Olivier, have written about the Panjshir Valley. You know the people in question. You've interviewed Ahmad Massoud, who is the son of the former Mujahideen commander. How do you rate their chances? Do you think they stand a chance of building momentum for their resistance movement, or do you think it's just a question of time before the Taliban go in large numbers and wipe them out once and for all?
It's a resistance very weak, actually. It's a national front of resistance because they're alone. And all the valley of Panjshir, which is very long, 120 kilometers, but very narrow, and with no escape now. Why? Because among the strategy of the Taliban before seizing Kabul was to occupy all the 21 valleys around, and this is new, compared with the Panjshir Valley of Ahmad Shah Massoud, the Lion of Panjshir. And so they are circled, and there's no escape. But Ahmad Massoud, who is 32 years old, is clever. He has a lot of support in the population. He's not representant only of Tajik nation, but also of all nations. You want an Afghan unified country.
Educated in London. Does he have international support as well?
He has a little bit in the US and UK also. He was 5 years in King's College, also on the military academy at Sandhurst. And he received a lot of people actually coming from Kabul and civil servants, military experts and lawyers and doctors, etc. So he has some knowledge, he has some manpower around him.
But behind the scenes, are the Americans giving him any logistical support?
Not yet. I think the US Army could maybe strike some spot seized by the Taliban if they want to attack Panjshir. For the moment, it's not possible because it's a very narrow valley, and the father of Ahmad used to block the valley with dynamites. It's very easy. But after, this is a long-term strategy. What he can do, he needs support. He needs military support. He needs political support, recognition also. But I want also to focus on the civilian resistance coming from the women, from the NGOs. I mean, the Afghan one, for 20 years, the Afghan women, the Afghan civil society used to build something, information. There are more than 1,000 newspapers, or more than 120 radios and channels in the country. So the people, it's a new people actually. The people know something new about the world, and they want to have stability, they want to have peace, but they want also to have freedom. So it could be also a challenge actually to focus on the civil society to help also the women inside the movement of resistance, I mean civilian resistance. And just for recognition, it's very important for Western countries to be there and to help them on the ground.
Okay, we're nearly out of time. I'd like to go back to Annie Ford-Timer just before we go. I mean, obviously the United States leaving a major void there in Afghanistan, a security void. and another type of void as well. And I'm just wondering, which countries do you see filling that void and potentially benefiting from events as they've unfolded?
Well, on a negative level, I guess I see that, Russia, which has now sort of consolidated its hold in Central Asia. Central Asia was looking to be more of an independent player, an economic partner, an energy corridor through Afghanistan, is now forced to turn back more to Russia. I think that China has a position of exploiting some of Afghanistan's natural resources, also Iran, the water resources it's had its eye on. But in terms of filling the void, India is an important player. They have commercial interests. And as others have pointed out, the Afghans themselves, they've always been a pawn in the chess game. They actually have many, many people who are capable of trying to steer the country's course. But in this period of time, they're going to feel that they've been taken over by other forces in the region, Pakistan, Russia, etc. And it's going to take a long time for them to raise their heads again, to show that leadership.
And just lastly, let me put this question to you as well, of course, because you served in Kabul and represented the United States there. Just looking back on all these years, Annie, I mean, anything good come out of this? Is anything that perhaps the United States can say, we left that behind for the Afghan people?
I do think that many good things happened. The way that we left has undermined some of those good things. So I will just be modest in saying the best thing about it is the generation of people in their 20s and 30s who had an uninterrupted, for the most part, schooling and early employment opportunity. And they are the ones, as others have pointed out, who are going to protest against efforts to sort of break the economy or cut Afghanistan off from the rest of the world.
Okay, well, thank you so much. You've had the last word, but I'm being told we're absolutely out of time. Annie Fortimer, thank you very much indeed. Thank you as well to Wida Mehran for joining us on the program. And here with me in the studio, Olivier Weber, thank you to you. And thank you to our correspondent, Cyril Payan in Kabul, who was with us at the beginning of the show. That's all we have time for. That was the France 24 debate.